This is the complete story of the loyal, maybe not so loyal butler of the Hellsing family, Walter C. Dornez, aka the Angel of Death. Walter's first appearance was in volume 1 of the Hellsing manga, which back then had a way simpler art style that evolved massively during the years. He was 69 years old and working for the Hellsing family, but that's only his first manga appearance. The time was September 1944, Warsaw, Poland, where the war had an end in sight, but was still raging on. On the Hellsing timeline, this was Walter's first appearance in Hellsing the Dawn, when a 14-year-old Walter was bumming a cigarette off a soldier before jumping out of an airplane into enemy territory. His first cover appearance, however, was on volume 9, which I proudly display with Manga Guardian. Whether you like to display singles, doubles, quadruples, or something else entirely, they got a solution. So check out Manga Guardian with the code SLEEPY15 to get 15% off, or use the link in the description. And back to the video. Did you know that at that time, children under 16 were not allowed to smoke under the Children's Act of 1908? Yes, this is an official government paper, and yes, I looked this up for you. The length I'm going in order to entertain you. But back to the topic. The goal was to exterminate a hidden vampire and ghoul research operation that could possibly turn around the war. He's accompanied by a coffin where you know who is inside. Considering his age, it gives us some clues about Walter and his upbringing. He was born around 1930, meaning that he grew up in a pretty harsh version of Britain. A world economic crisis wrecked the living standards with extreme unemployment and poverty. In 1938, the British government tried not to stir things up with Germany by accepting the takeover of a small piece of land from Czechoslovakia called the Sudetenland, which then rang the bells for World War II. This takeover was regulated in a meeting called the Munich Agreement, where the United Kingdom, the French Republic and the Kingdom of Italy agreed on the annexation of the formerly called Sudetenland. At that point, tensions were already pretty high, and this appeasement policy turned out to be the wrong call, and everybody noticed that when the Blitz happened. The Blitz was the German Air Force's attack on Britain, especially London. The first bombs on London, however, were apparently not intended, and basically happened by human error. They were against official orders. This marked the start of a pretty brutal Air Force versus Air Force war that left both countries in shambles. Walter was 10 during that time, and has most likely lived through all of it. The upbringing during the economic crisis explains the crudeness and foul mouth. He grew up during much tougher times, which hardened him even as a child. Also, you have to understand one thing. People were unhappy, demoralized and poor during the economic crisis, and government acceptance was very low. People were pretty pissed, and the war killed the last bit of morale that was left because of the inhumane bombardment that happened over London. I mean, that is what you assume, but that didn't happen. Having a common enemy and suffering together brought the British population together again and created a new sense of belonging, unity and patriotism, which was necessary to keep up the war against the enemy. This phenomenon was called the Blitz spirit. There are, however, historians who kinda doubt that it was all that great. A lot can be explained by government propaganda that did everything to keep the country afloat and keep morale up, so take it with a grain of salt. But this also explains Walter's apparent loyalty to the Hellsing agency, as it is directly under the jurisdiction of the royal government. A lot of stuff happened during his formative years that still accompany him in old age. Walter then proceeds to jump out of the plane and lands directly into enemy territory, where he is met by Millennium. But instead of making quick work of the enemies, he is confronted by the Hauptmann, which is a more than formidable foe for him and pushes him quite a lot. This, however, awakens Alucard, who also quickly realizes that his enemy is neither human nor vampire, which makes him leave, to the surprise of Walter. Walter then has to fight the Hauptmann alone, and this is where Hellsing the Dawn ends. We don't know whether he won or lost, but assuming that everyone from the Dawn was still alive in Hellsing, he either lost or probably made some kind of deal with them that concealed their disappearance for the next 55 years. Walter's next appearance is only metaphorical, since it's more his disappearance that is causing trouble. Here for a young Integra Hellsing, who is about to become disappeared by her father's brother, who wanted to take over the Hellsing organization.
For my brother, your father, to die, and then mere hours before his death he chooses you.
Arthur decided not to give the lead to his brother, but instead his daughter, which made Richard furious. Arthur's last words were that if Integra finds herself in danger, she should go into the catacombs of the Hellsing mansion and look for protection there, only to find a corpse. Well, you know who he is. Alucard is stored and sealed in the basement because, well, he's completely unhinged and uncontrollable and should only be used when time requires it. But we know he was reawakened and has since then been a relatively loyal servant to Integra. Walter could have easily prevented this. Either to make sure that Alucard reawakens, or maybe he just really was not there at that point. Both are only theories, but I will explain my final theory in the end, when all the facts are laid onto the table. But this ends this part of the story. Alucard has reawakened once again. Walter then serves Integra and supports Alucard and Ceres on their missions. He also provided Alucard with his new weapon, the Jackal, which was designed to deal with Anderson's regeneration. And he also gives Ceres her new gun, the Harkonnen.
The Harkonnen?
Promptly after that, the Hellsing Manor gets raided, and Luke and Jan Valentine enter the place. This is where we see Walter's true abilities. He's not just any regular old butler. He uses wires that are fixed to his hands with rings to cut and slice enemies. He also easily dodges bullets. I mean, not bad for a 69-year-old human. Turns out Jan Valentine and a bunch of ghouls were no challenge for the aged Angel of Death, and he pretty much makes quick work of them. But they get one final hint from them. Walter, then ordered by Integra, does research, but comes up with some pretty useless information. But Integra is smarter than that. She gives one more option, and here's where you think Walter is trying to hide something. Because the artificial vampires and ghouls are something he is pretty aware of. The next chapters don't really include Walter all that much. He was seen being intrigued and impressed by Integra when she had to deal with Alucard's sassiness, and when Rip Van Winkle took over the Eagle, he was definitely noticing who they were dealing with. He then was seen bouncing off ideas on how to stop that ship from reaching Britain with Integra. But these were only the beginnings of what happens now. The war starts when a bunch of vampire-turned betrayers were raiding the British Special Security Council, trying to take Integra hostage. Well, guess who they didn't account for? Walter quickly finishes the freaks, and then they get into the car trying to relocate Integra to the Hellsing main headquarters, but they were then stopped by the Hauptmann. Walter tells Integra to flee because he knows he cannot stop this one. And then he has a fun little reunion with his old friends. The next time we see Walter is when he stomps on the remains of a recently defeated Anderson. He is visibly younger and stronger than ever. A visibly shocked Ceres, of course, wanted to know what happened. But Walter explains that this is his own free will to betray Hellsing. Integra, visibly hurt, accepts Walter's betrayal and then proceeds to tell Alucard to kill him. This unshaken resolve only reaffirms Walter's belief that Integra was definitely worth serving all these years. He then gets flustered when Ceres thanks him for the time they had together. He was always nice and supportive. At least to Ceres.
You as well.
To her, Walter was kind of a normal person, compared to all the people she met during her time at Hellsing. Alucard then mocks Walter with a prediction that will turn out to be more than true in the end. Walter then throws everything he has at Alucard, pushing the no-life king pretty hard, only to be outclassed in the end. The goal was to defeat Alucard while he was alone, having released all the beings he consumed. This is the only time you could consider him being actually vulnerable. But although it seems like he was pretty close, Alucard stayed unpredictable and wasn't defeated.
That's right. Good try, though.
Walter's body wasn't holding up with the botched vampire transformation that happened in only a few hours. Instead of being able to regenerate the damage, he just turns younger and younger while his body disintegrates. He was aware that he was on borrowed time, but didn't expect it to be this short. Alucard then proceeds to reabsorb all the lives that were lost in the war, making him basically immortal again. Walter didn't want to admit his defeat, but the Major already set his plans in motion. Before Alucard could retaliate, he absorbs the blood of Schrödinger, immobilizing him and ending his sense of being, and he then disappears. Walter could not really enjoy the sense of victory over the monster Alucard, since self-doubt was creeping up on him. Is this really what he wanted? Is this the way he wanted to defeat Alucard, by basically needing to rely on the trick that is the fringe being Schrödinger? He doesn't really get the time to think about it, since he then gets shot at by Heinkel. But instead of accepting his fate, he realizes there's one more task he has to fulfill. He overwhelms Heinkel and then went further on his mission. In the end, he confronts the Doctor, killing him and destroying the corpse of Mina Harker to end this chapter of the war forever. He then spends the last minutes of his life thinking about what could have been if he had defeated Alucard and saying goodbye to Integra, who was visibly shaken by his death. So, why did Walter betray Hellsing? I think he wasn't a betrayer from the beginning, but seeing his life fade and him becoming old, while Alucard stays strong and immortal forever, did something to his ego. And when he met the Major again, and he offered him a fight with Alucard on equal grounds, he just took it. His betrayal to Integra hurt him, and the loss of Seras too, just like Alucard taunted him. In the end, he repented by ending any follow-up that could have been created by the Doctor. I think you could expand these theories even further, but for me, this is an ending I'm more than fine with. Hellsing isn't some super deep, intricate plot, if you don't want it to be. It is just a bunch of insane characters fighting, which for me is more than enough to say that this is one of my favorites of all time. This will be the start of a series where I will analyze all the Hellsing characters. So if you have any recommendation on whom to start with, write it in the comments and subscribe to the channel. And this marks the end of the analysis of Walter C. Dornez, aka the Angel of Death. I hope you enjoyed this video and see you in the next one. Bye.